Rogers TV.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 16, minus 13 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa City Council will vote on a controversial decision impacting Algonquin land in the city's rural southeast this morning. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
The proposal would see over 400 hectares of land developed into an environmentally friendly suburb, but multiple Indigenous groups have voiced their disagreement. Open letter from an Algonquin Grand Chief was sent to the mayor last week that outlines their disappointment with City Council and the mayor on a lack of consultation on the development. Algonquin Anishinaabe National Tribal Council Chief Verna Paulson tells City News the council decision should be postponed.
It'd be very sad if this get approved. You know, I would like to see the City Council to postpone the decision. That's the first thing. And the consultation process, we were never consulted on this process.
She says this decision extinguishes their rights and the city needs to hear why they are opposing the project. Chief Dylan Whiteduck of the Kitigan Zibi Anishinaabe has also voiced opposition and is requesting to be consulted on any decision involving Algonquin Anishinaabe lands. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News time, 9:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Sun and cloud, and may have more cloud than sun at times, but overall a pretty good day. The high -7. Yeah, that is below average, though. Partly cloudy tonight, -16. It'll feel a bit colder with the wind. Tomorrow, sunshine and -9. For today, the high, -7.
And right now in Ottawa, -16. It's -13 in Smiths Falls. The Central Beer House in Canada Centrum has announced it's closing, lights off for good, in a Facebook post. The owners thanked the staff who worked at the restaurant over the past 7 years, especially the small team working this past summer as they coped with the COVID-19 pandemic. An update to a story we told you about yesterday. Even more debris found on Highway 17. This time it's a hot water tank and a water softener tank. The Upper Ottawa Valley Detachment of OPP found the items on the shoulder of the highway near Beeline Road in Laurentian Valley Township. First doses of COVID-19 vaccine are set to finish being administered within Ottawa's high-risk retirement homes today. According to a memo from the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services, Anthony DeMonte, 37 high-risk retirement homes were identified out of 84 designated homes in the city. City News time, 9:02. The off-peak rate freeze for your hydro bill is going to stay in place at least until February 22nd now, extending this for another couple of weeks. The province says it will continue holding the off-peak rate at 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour. That is for residential use as well as small businesses and farms. The nominees for this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have just been announced this morning.
Among this year's first-time nominees, Foo Fighters, The Go-Go's, rock pioneers Iron Maiden, and hip-hop legend Jay-Z. Yeah. 16 acts in all nominated to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, along with Mary J. Blige, Kate Bush, Devo, Fela Kuti, LL Cool J, New York Dolls, Shaka Khan, Rage Against the Machine, Todd Rundgren, and Dionne Warwick. Tina Turner's nominated as a solo artist. She's already in with ex-husband Ike. And Carole King is in as a songwriter, now nominated for the first time as a performer. We'll find out who gets in May. Jason Nathanson, ABC News, Hollywood.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Separating headlines
from hearsay.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
The warmest place in all of Canada right now, according to Environment Canada, is a place called Race Rocks Light Station, British Columbia, where it is plus 2.6 degrees. That's what passes for warm in Canada right now. And the coldest place in all of Canada is Thompson, Manitoba, where it is minus 44.9 degrees. Minus 44.9 without a wind chill. Oh, it's cold out there, and I mean just about everywhere. It must be the carbon tax. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Could it be related to the carbon tax? Canada needs more carbon tax. Good morning. This is the Rob Snow Show, Rogers TV and City News. It's kind of a fake Friday for me and David, the team here at the Rob Snow Show. That means me and David.
The crack team.
After today, we're taking a few days off. We will not be back until Tuesday of next week. No, we are not headed to Myrtle Beach to play golf.
I should be, though.
We are taking time off and probably not going anywhere. But before we check out, we have a lot of business to attend to between now and noon. We are going to talk about this ungodly weather. You bet we are. David Phillips from Environment Canada is our guest in the final hour of the program, 11:15. I'm looking forward to that. Maybe he can pull some strings with Mother Nature. What do you think? Get us some more seasonal weather. I mean, the normal daytime high for this time of year in Ottawa is -4. We are not expected to see -4 until 1 week from Sunday. 1 week from Sunday. As well, this morning, council meeting today. Some heavy-duty issues up for debate, a round of yays and nays. The big issue, the urban boundary, the Taiwan development near Carlsbad Springs, getting a lot of attention because of the blowback, how this is blown back on this city council in quite an embarrassing fashion, I must say. There's also this idea of a gold belt, all of it. The whole file is turned into a total fiasco. And the big question is, what will the city council do? Will it do what it should do, which is press the pause button, okay? Defer all of these hasty back-of-the-napkin decisions. Will it do that, or will it just stubbornly move things along? Our friends at Rogers Television will have the council meeting, as they always do, in its entirety today. We have analysis prepped and ready to go for you from two of the best in the business. Author and columnist Randall Denley is coming up just a few minutes from now. He's a column in the paper today about this in the Ottawa Citizen. And later in the show, Ottawa Sun columnist, longtime critic and observer of City Hall shenanigans, Sue Schering, will join me. It's a mess. It really is. They've made a mess of it. Your city council is making a mess of the entire planning process in this city. They're making a mockery of it, really. It's astonishing how they're making it up as they go along. This is the place to score your political fix. Pundits ready to go. Cam Holmstrom and Kate Harrison. Cam's more on the left side of things, Kate more on the right side of things. As you know, I'm stuck in the middle with you. So much happening in federal politics. There's always the endless speculation about the timing of the next federal election. I think yesterday's news about the CERB forgiveness and the tax debt holiday for CERB and all the income relief programs tells everything you need to know about the timing of the next federal election. I think it's the strongest signal yet that the Liberals, they're kind of going down this checklist that they have. Items we want to clean up. People we want to placate. Loose ends we want to tie up before we send Canadians to the polls during a health and economic crisis. Probably sometime in April. We'll have some vaccines by then. The vaccine situation, by the way, we're going to talk about that again, such as it is. You have to wonder what that means, don't you, for the timing of the election? Say, you're Mr. Trudeau. This is your great advantage as prime minister. All prime ministers enjoy this advantage. You decide when the next election is going to be. So if you're Mr. Trudeau, do you wait and hope things improve with vaccines before you call the election, or do you call the election early in case things go from bad to worse? And you know what? They're pretty bad. There is a story in the Vancouver Sun this morning about the supply of vaccines in British Columbia. They are so low on vaccines there. In British Columbia, they're only able to administer less than 1,100 doses on Monday. For the entire province, 1,100 doses. A province of 5 million people. I did a little Googling this morning, and in British Columbia has about the same population as the state of Louisiana. And Louisiana is administering about 21,000 doses of vaccine every day, which is not only better than British Columbia, it's better than the entire country of Canada. So that's one story that's in the news on vaccines, pandemic preparedness. Honeywell, I don't know if you saw this story this week. It's in the Sun today, but it was a Blacklock's reporter scoop, a massive, massive scoop. Bombshell story this week. It is a bombshell. It is a scandal resulting from a massive government document dump from Trudeau's government earlier this week. Listen to this, folks. This is why I subscribe to Blacklock's reporter, and you should too. Honeywell, the big American manufacturing company, Honeywell, it had a broker contact the Trudeau government 8 days after the pandemic was declared. I mean, we're going back to like the middle of March. 8 days after the pandemic was declared. 8 days later. And this official representing Honeywell said, N95 masks, you're going to need them. You're going to need a lot of them. And Honeywell is willing to make them for you. Guaranteed supply. Honeywell has a factory in Tijuana, Mexico, and it's willing to offer you an entire production line from that Tijuana factory just for Canada. They've already done this for the United States. They're willing to do the same thing for you, but you have to act. You have to act now. They pitched that to the dim-witted fools at the Public Health Agency of Canada, which said, no thanks. Nah. Pass. Masks are not a priority for us. They have the emails, folks. They have the emails. Thanks, but no thanks. We pass. Why isn't that leading the national news at night? Let me ask you, why isn't that on the cover of the Toronto Star this morning? That, ladies and gentlemen, is incompetence of the highest order, and it is scandalous. Because you remember, it wasn't long after that the country left us scrounge and scour the world for any and all PPE we could find, and we were paying through the nose for it. It's outrageous, the things that are now coming to light almost a year into this. Some of the mind-numbingly stupid decisions made by this Trudeau government. We're going to get into that this morning. On the opposition side of what passes for a House of Commons these days, Aaron O'Toole is going to make some moves today, apparently. Reports are, word is, Aaron O'Toole is going to shuffle the shadow cabinet. These are the critic roles for the official opposition, and one of those moving is Pierre Poilievre, the local firecracker. He was, who knows by now, finance critic for the official opposition. Darn good one, too. And the more we learn about that, we'll let you know. We'll fill you in. We'll ask our political junkies what Aaron O'Toole's thinking might be with those moves right now. And March break. To break or not to break? Brian Lilly has the scoop for the Sun papers today. The Ford government considering delaying March break. Nothing set in stone. Meetings are being held. Discussions are being had. You can bet debates are going on. March break could still go ahead as planned. It could be pushed back until April. Or they might just cancel March break altogether and end the school year early at the end of the year. If you're Doug Ford, this is another one of those lose-lose situations. You're not going to win, whatever move you make. You cancel March break, you're going to get heck. If March break goes ahead and then there's a spike in cases because people are doing family outings, then you're going to get heck for that. So what would you do? If you were Doug Ford, do you have March break as is? Delay March break? Do you cancel March break and the school year early? You can have your say on that and other topics this morning during our Talkback Hour. We do it every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. It's our favorite hour of the day. It's an hour of phone calls. It's an hour of opinions. Our call-in line is 750-1310, 750-1310. 613-750-1310. It's the hottest radio in town, and you can be part of it right here on The Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
So Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our centre is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the center. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring, and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our center, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our center the Ottawa Good Food Box, as well as the Market Mobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years, and Market Mobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighborhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
Of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Again, our friends at Rogers Television will leave the Rob Snow Show once the City Council begins, and they'll have the meeting in its entirety. But before then, Randall Denley is here, columnist and author, and you're kind of like the pregame show this morning, Randall Denley. Good morning. It's great to hear from you, and quite enjoy your column in the newspaper today. It's spot on. Because this Algonquin proposal, Taywin, you argue it does have merit. Why do you think it has merit, Randall? It's not a bad idea.
No, it's not a bad idea because there's a long history behind it. Way back in the 70s, the first time we had a region-wide planning exercise, they called for 4 satellite cities, of which this area would have been one. But of course, way back then, things like developer influence and politics were what determined the day, so instead we got Canada, Barrhaven, and Orleans. There's really nothing worse about this place than there was about any of the others. It's a significant piece of land. If the city wants to do something really different in the suburbs, which they talk about a lot, you pretty much have to do it on a blank slate like Taywin. If you add a little bit to the edge of Orleans or a little bit to the edge of Canada, it's not going to change the nature of those communities. This is a chance, potentially, to do something different. And I think a lot has been made about, but it was so far away. It's in the middle of nowhere, Rob.
Yeah. Well,
how far from nowhere is it? Well, the edge of city development, the closest edge would be Hunt Club and Hawthorne. It's 6.5 kilometers from there.
6.5 kilometers.
Which is the same distance, from Moody Drive to Canada Centrum, something that people do all the time, and it takes a few minutes to think, oh, well, whatever.
Right. They're in their 15-minute community there in Canada, right?
Yeah. It's really, it's not a big deal. It's also interesting, I think, that when this was first proposed for development in the 70s, federal and provincial governments owned the land. They were strongly in favor of development. NCC weighed in and said, yeah, it's a good spot. Let's develop this. Now, maybe it's because they owned the land. Who knows? But there was a lot of push behind it back then, but the decision was made locally, so it didn't matter too much what the feds in the province thought because it was going to be down to municipal politicians. So, here we go again with an idea that I don't think it's not necessarily a bad idea. It's certainly worth considering.
Right.
But the problem that councillors have now is that they didn't weigh any of that, really. They just said, Aboriginal reconciliation.
Yeah.
Carried.
Yeah.
And it's not a planning basis, so you can't defend it on a planning basis because they have nothing to defend it on. They haven't got a report.
Yeah. I think, it's almost indefensible on a planning basis. And to try and defend it on a reconciliation basis is not going to be my job or your job, Randall's. Listen to the people who are talking, grand chiefs and chiefs of actual Algonquin communities who are saying this flies in the face of reconciliation.
Yeah, that whole reconciliation angle is blown up in their faces, and very predictably so, because the separation between Algonquins of Ontario and other Algonquins has been well known for a long time, so it shouldn't have caught councillors by surprise, but all they knew about it, I think, most of them, was what they heard at that committee meeting, so it sounded good. They called themselves the Algonquins of Ontario. They must be the Algonquins of Ontario. If they called themselves some of the Algonquins of Ontario, it would be a little closer to the mark. But you just can't plan based on the ethnicity of the proponent. That doesn't make sense. And I see now, somewhat amusingly, all the environmental groups that are concerned about what they believe is urban sprawl and so forth, they're all lining up now against this too, because they don't like where it is, right? So. Yeah. Councillors getting it from multiple directions now.
But still, I don't get the sense that the mayor has moved at all on this.
Well, he'll be a pretty bad politician if he doesn't, because he is on the wrong side of this, and there's an easy solution that I think he'd be smart to take. If he just bowls ahead and says, I don't care what Algonquins say, I think it's reconciliation. I don't care what environmental groups say. I'm good with, land outside outside the urban boundary. Where's that leave him? It's not a good place to be.
Okay. Do you think later today he may have an epiphany?
He may have another epiphany. The first one was when he thought, wait, this is good. Okay. Even though, staff has said, well, we could look at part of it and get back to you in 5 years.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have been surprised by the recommendation, but, suddenly he was for it. I suspect that just as suddenly he'll find a way out. And it's fairly easy to resolve this, Rob, because if it's a planning decision, it needs a planning study. So why not say to the Taywin proponents, all right, we may well like your idea, but we need to know more.
Right.
So we're going to look at not just at half your land, but all of your land, and we're going to do it in some tighter time period, maybe a year, not 5, and we're going to bring this back, and if we like what we see,
you're in.
And we'll approve it.
Yeah. Okay.
Punting stuff off to the future is, of course, very tried and true way to deal with problems at the city, but in this case, I think they'd be doing the right thing.
All right. Okay, so that big city issue, again, council meeting starting, you can watch it on Rogers Television. I have to ask you what you think is ahead because I know you're not a fan based on your column this week for the Post about the Ford reopening plan. But what do you think is ahead for March break? Do you think parents should make March break plans with their children? What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, the intriguing idea floating around now of moving March break to the end of June.
Yeah, to the end of June, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
If you're contractually obligated to give a March break, it probably doesn't say it has to be in March. It's a tough issue, Rob, because when kids were home over Christmas, numbers went up.
Yeah.
And it might not just be because they weren't in school, but it would be hard to say that there was no impact on it. And the teachers union say, look, we're exhausted, the kids are exhausted, the parents are exhausted, we all need a break. I'm not sure it'd be much of a break for the parents, really. It's just more like a child care obligation, because it's not like there's a lot of places to go, although, maybe ski hills by then, you never know. I wouldn't make plans for March break, because I think the situation is volatile.
Okay.
And also the government's quite willing to act arbitrarily based on, who knows what. So if you make anything, it's going to be money you can't get back. That could be a mistake.
Okay. Thanks. Great to hear from you this morning, as always, Randall Denley.
Okay, take care, Rob.
Randall Denley, author and columnist for Post Media. His preview of what might happen on the Taywin development, which is a big decision facing our city council today, is in today's Ottawa Citizen. So coming up right after the news, Cam Holmstrom from Bluesky Strategy Group, more on the NDP side of things. Kate Harrison, more on the progressive conservative side of things. She's the vice chair of Summa Strategies. We'll do your political fix. We'll talk about the slow pace of the vaccine rollout in this country, how that's impacting federal politics. Some polls have indicated that it's a much tighter race now, may even be tied between the Liberals and the Conservatives. We talk about the CERB. Anything on Twitter yet about the shuffling of the shadow cabinet?
I'm on shuffle
roles?
watch, and
you're on. David's on shuffle watch.
Shuffle watch,
because there are reports that PAULA is going to be moved out of his critic role,
That
where
is what they're saying.
He's been the critic for finance for the Conservative Party of Canada. Election speculation, all that stuff. David Phillips, senior climatologist at Environment Canada, on when is it going to warm up? Just give me -4. It's the normal high is -4. Just give me normal. I'm not being greedy. I'll just take some normal. And every Wednesday, we get the very latest from Up the Line, and this Wednesday is no exception. Bruce McIntyre, where they are getting back to normal in Renfrew County. He is our correspondent here on the Rob Snow Show. He will join us from the Eganville Leader. 9:30 news is just ahead on the Rob Snow Show here on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, February 10th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 14 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's minus 12. And here's what's making news this hour. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the federal government is providing nearly $15 billion for public transit projects across the country. Soon. Trudeau says the promised $14.9 billion in public transit funding will be spread over 8 years, and most of the money won't even start flowing until the year 2026. Ottawa City Council dealing with the issue of expanded urban boundaries and particular parcels of land earmarked for development. One in particular, though, has drawn the ire of some. It is owned by the Algonquins of Ontario and Taggart. Some Indigenous leaders and communities are questioning, though, that proposal. Renfrew County opens up today. Small businesses allowed to dust off the open sign and welcome customers back in. The rest of Eastern Ontario remains in a stay-at-home order until next week. Next week is too late for yet another city business that is going the way of the dodo. The beer house in Canada has announced it's closing its doors for good after 7 years in the Centrum. It hoped many of the staff will continue to work at the Centrum's Crazy Horse. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix. Cam Holmstrom is here from Blue Sky. Cam, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Now, Cam, Kate is here as well. Kate Harrison, Vice Chair, Summa Strategies. Hi, Kate.
Hello, guys. How are you this morning?
We're good. Well, I won't speak on behalf of Cam, but I'm good.
I'm good.
Now, Cameron, if I am not mistaken, I believe you once told me that you are originally from Kenora. Is that right?
This is true. Proudly so.
Kenora, Ontario. I'm just looking at Google here.
Yes.
The weather in Kenora right now is minus 33.
Oh, my God.
Like, without the wind chill. Okay.
Yep. But it's a dry cold.
Now, see, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but for example, my girlfriend Jen is convinced, she spent a lot of time in Calgary, that the cold of Western Canada is different than the cold, for example, of Eastern Ontario. She is convinced that minus 20 here is actually a lot colder than, say, minus 30 in Alberta or minus 33 in Kenora. Do you believe that, Cam? You can tolerate minus 33 in Kenora, or?
Rob, I was saying this earlier this week. I would take it any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Really?
Because the difference is that when you get that moist cold here, it gets right into the bones. Whereas when you're in the dry cold on the prairies or in Northern Ontario like that, you just don't get that. The wind gets bad, yes, but after a certain point, it doesn't feel any worse. You know, and I don't lie. Like I'm honest about this. The coldest I've ever felt in my entire life was I used to live in Peterborough and I coached rep soccer there.
Okay.
And it was a November night. It was about 10 below. It was sleeting and snowing. That was the coldest. I used to snowmobile to school every day in high school in minus 40, and I didn't feel that cold. So yes, you have a smart one there.
There you go. That's great. One. Oh yes, I do. Absolutely. You're not from the north, are you? Right, Kate? You're not from.
No, I'm from that very cold and dark and dirty place of Peterborough.
Peterborough. There you go. Okay.
So you're bringing back. This is really triggering for me, guys.
It's triggering. Okay. All right.
Well, I love
and Kate, you didn't snowmobile to school in Peterborough.
Not quite.
No.
No.
Okay. All right.
No.
Okay. All right. Let's get into the politics of the day. I thank you both for joining me today. How do you think, Cam, the slow pace of vaccines is impacting federal politics right now? The polls would seem to indicate that it has certainly hurt the Liberals and tightened the race. What do you think?
Well, and that makes sense. Like, I think one thing that people understand right now going through this is that different levels of government have different jobs, right? And everyone understands that when it comes to the federal government, their job is getting the vaccine. So when something goes wrong or there are delays, that will fall on them. even if it's beyond their control, it will still fall on them because, frankly, they haven't communicated it well. They haven't let people be comfortable with what's happening because they've kept things back, and they've only come clean after someone else came clean for them. And I think that's built a mistrust. And I think that's very valuable in this period when people are wondering, when am I going to get mine? The other side of it, though, too, Rob, I think of it is that it's how do we look by comparison? You know, our neighbors to the southwest now, you're seeing on the news every night, you know, baseball stadiums and football stadiums and arenas filling up with drive-through vaccinations and people, tens of thousands getting vaccinated by the day in these sites.
Yep.
You know, people
can look that stuff up themselves on the internet and compare how other countries are doing.
Exactly, right? So whereas this government benefited, I think, from the comparison to a government that was struggling before down to the south of the border, now they seem to be getting some of their stuff together. They're suffering by the comparison. And you know what? That's part of what it is, but that means the government needs to step up its game.
Okay. What do you think, Kate, about how the slow pace of vaccines is impacting federal politics and the perceived tightening of the poll numbers?
Yeah, well, people seem to be very dissatisfied with how the Liberals are handling this issue. And one of the polls that came out last week was from our research partners over at Abacus. And in a 3-week period, we saw a shift of 17 to 19 points in terms of how the government is performing on vaccines. That is considerable. And that moved very quickly. Is it possible that will move back? I think certainly. If the government is able to start delivering on schedule, they'll be able to correct those numbers, and I think Canadians will generally forgive the blip that we've seen. But while people are dissatisfied with how the Liberals are doing, and half of Canadians say they're doing a poor or terrible job in procuring vaccines and getting them here in a timely way, and that's across Canada, the opposition hasn't been able to turn that into any kind of positive momentum. So people are content to be discontent with how the Liberals are doing on this issue, but it doesn't mean that they're going to the NDP or the Conservatives in droves thinking that they'll do a better job. So
where are they going? They're just... what do you mean?
They're moving away from the Liberals, but they're not parking their vote with anybody else.
Okay.
So they're just sort of venting their frustration, and I think there's a lot of frustration to be had out there, but we're not seeing a change in the polling numbers for the Conservatives. A modest margin of error bump for the NDP, maybe, and perhaps more concerning for the Liberals in Quebec. The Bloc has now taken over the lead in Quebec, so that could play into election timing too. But I'm sure we'll come to that later.
Yes, we will. Okay, this is the Prime Minister doing the Rideau Cottage Shuffle this week. Asked about vaccines. Go ahead. We're going to play this.
From all Canadians right now, people are worried. People are tired of this pandemic. They want to know when this winter is going to be over. They want to know when they can go back to everything they've done before. They want to know mostly when their grandparents are going to be safe, when the vaccines are going to come. That's why there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of noise going on right now. That's why I want to reassure Canadians that we are on track.
Okay. So it's that last part there. I've had a lot of fun with that this week. Play that again.
We are on track.
One more time.
We are on track.
We're on track. Okay, we're on track. We're on track. We're on track. Come on. When he says stuff like that, isn't that hurting his credibility, Cam? What do you think? We're on track? Really? You're on track? Give me a break.
We are on track.
Honestly, I think it is hurt his credibility because here's the thing, right? It's funny the way he phrased that whole empathetic part up front because you know what? People have lost people during this, or people have lost family and have for other reasons and haven't been able to see them and have had to suffer through this. And there's a lot of pain there. But when you basically sit there and tell me but it's going as planned, I'm sorry, I'm not believing you. Like I always had this my dad had this saying when I was growing up. It would say, don't piss on my shoe and tell me it's raining. Like that's what you're telling me. It's bad, but you're telling me, oh no, it's going as it's supposed to. Like, no, this is not how it's supposed to. Because
I think your dad knows my dad, I think. I probably knows Kate's dad too. Yeah.
More than likely. But again, this is one of these things. It's like, look, like we know it's not, because again, we have points of comparison. Now, here's the thing that I think this government could have done long ago to make maybe that idea stick. They've never been public and open and transparent about the plan. We don't know what the plan is, so how can you tell me we're going to plan and I can believe you? Because I've got nothing to verify it against. If you'd been upfront and said, look, here's the plan, here's what it is, right? Then I could objectively know if it's going to plan or not, right? But because you can't do that, I can't trust you that you're telling me the truth here. And that's the most important thing right now. We got to be able to trust these people, and they're not making it easy for us.
Okay. On track. Does that erode credibility, Kate, when he says things like he seems to be in denial, you know?
By what measure? By what measure are we possibly on track? We are down shipments. We are nowhere close to where we thought we would be in terms of administration of vaccines. I have no idea how he can kind of credibly stand up there and say that. And to play the reassuring prime minister dad role and talk about the anxiety people are facing and basically, give a pat on the head and say, it'll be okay, don't worry, we've got things under control. And all the criticism out there is really just noise, is really quite tone deaf in my view. And again, it is entirely possible that things will start to turn around next week. But to Cam's point, start being more transparent with the details. You've got cabinet ministers coming to health committees fighting tooth and nail not to release the details of these contracts, whereas other countries have been able to do so. The Conservatives were able to produce contracts from other G7 allies. They can't even get them for Canada. So they need to start being more forthcoming with details. And if they're not going to meet deadlines and they're not going to meet the targets that they plan, start conditioning for that now. Otherwise, it looks like you're perennially just not meeting the bar that you've set for themselves.
Okay, so what does all of this mean for, the big question, the timing of an election, okay? In between the fixed election dates, this is the great advantage of any prime minister, deciding when to say, we're going to the polls. So if you're Mr. Trudeau, do you wait and hope things improve with vaccines before you call the election, or do you go early in case things deteriorate from here? To me, this is the quandary that the Liberals are in right now. What do you think, Cam? What do you think?
I've never been hot on the idea of them going this spring, and I'm even less so now.
Oh, really?
Just because I don't know how. Like, you could have made the argument that if things were rolling out well and things are going well, you could take the chance and go and just and go in on a high. The problem is in this environment is that so much can shift in a campaign in 6 weeks. And what happens if things go wrong? And honestly, you're seeing an example of that play out right now in Newfoundland, their provincial election.
Okay.
They went to the polls early and, followed the model that all these other provinces had. But all of a sudden this week they're having a spike in cases and people are having to quarantine and can't go vote. And all of a sudden it's looking at maybe doing this, and this was not a good idea. And you're starting to hear people say that publicly. And who knows if that'll change the end result. But I think that kind of example might put a little scare into this government because, again, what happens in that period of time if things take off, if things get really worse, if there's a massive breakdown in the supply chain of vaccines again? Like, all of a sudden, do you really want to put yourself in that position of being at the hands of fate in that way? And I don't think they do. I think they would rather wait until the fall, till more people have been vaccinated, so you can get through to more of that. Because I think the risk of the unknown on this is too great for them. I don't think they're willing to take that risk.
Okay, so you're thinking September, October, maybe?
At this point, I'm more leaning towards the idea we don't come back in September.
And just before we jump to Kate, then, how do you see an election being triggered? Is it Mr. Trudeau goes to the Governor General, whoever that happens to be at the time, or maybe it's the Supreme Court Justice, the Chief Justice? And calling the election himself? Or do you see the minority, the other parties, actually defeating the government? How do you see it unfolding?
I don't see the opposition parties defeating, because I don't see all three coming together at the same time to do it. I just don't see it.
Right.
I picture this government basically deciding, no, we're going to go, and then deciding to wear it from there.
I see. Okay. So, Kate, what do you think? Do you hope things improve before you call the election, or do you call it early in case they get worse from here? What do you think?
I have a slightly different view than Cam on this one. I think we talk about a spring election like it would be a true spring election in March and April, and I think that more realistically that it could be like a May, June. The threshold for vaccination as part of phase one is the lowest that the government will have to meet in order to tick the box and say that they've done it. I think that It's possible the vaccine issues, they're complicated now. They might actually get more complicated as we head into summer and fall. People have in their minds that they're going to be vaccinated by September. That seems to have been a bit of a moving target. And if you look at the language the government has used, they've been very careful. Vaccines by September. Some of them say administered by September. Some of them are talking about later in the fall. So I think that there is a risk in waiting because people's expectations will be that there is a sense of a return to normalcy come September. And if they can't meet that, they might have a bigger problem on their hands than they do right now. So again, I think the next 3 to 4 weeks will be really indicative of whether or not we're likely to move. Cases are dropping. It's happening around the world. The third day in a row, the U.S. will be below 100,000 cases. They might be able to get phase 1 of vaccines done. They can deliver a budget in April that has a ton of good news. And they can head into a late spring, early summer period saying they've completed phase 1, phase 2 is rolling out. And by the way, don't you love nationalized childcare?
Oh,
that's not a bad position for them to be in, especially when the opposition doesn't necessarily have their act together.
And to the second point, do you think it's Mr. Trudeau saying this minority government is enough? I'm going and I'm seeking a mandate, or do you actually see the opposition ganging up on him and defeating the government?
I think that it would be likely to be Trudeau orchestrating his own defeat, and he says he needs a mandate from the people to implement the bold vision that they want to move forward with.
Okay. All right. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about some of the, what I think are some of the hints that an election is coming soon. The CERB file yesterday was one of them. And today, another big announcement from the Trudeau government on funding for public transit. And oh, by the way, if you elect the government, you could get $3 billion a year in public transit funding guaranteed starting in the year 2026. Starting in the year 2026, 5 years from now. That sounds like a pre-election goodie, too. So we'll be right back on that. It's Your Political Fix, Part 2, coming up next here on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. Sometimes people, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
We're back with your political fix. Lots of election speculation, and announcements like this just feed it. They just feed the election speculation. Prime Minister Trudeau has announced $15 billion for public transit projects over the next 8 years. Over the next 8 years. Okay, well, $15 billion over 8 years.
We are on track.
The what does that get you? 15 billion, 8 years. Okay, that's $2 billion a year, maybe less than. What do you get for that? Like maybe 2-3 kilometers of light rail in Ottawa, maybe. 5-6 years behind schedule.
That's we're on track. Playing that relation to transit is really PTSD for me and LRG.
The announcement comes with a permanent public transit infrastructure fund of $3 billion a year, beginning in 2026, 2027. Okay, beginning 5 years from now. Okay, beginning 5 years from now. In other words, if you elect us. Right, if you elect us. Mm-hmm. But then you also had the news about CERB, okay? And there has been this ongoing controversy about self-employed people who qualified for the CERB, felt they were misled by CRA about gross income, net income. We were all over that yesterday. And then if people have an income tax debt related to an income relief program, like CERB or the program that replaced CERB or the student benefit or the caregiver benefit or the, what is the other one? Canada Sickness Benefit as well. You'll have a year to figure that out with the CRA, which also comes across to me as though they're going through a checklist. These are the things we want to take care of. These are the constituencies that we want to placate before we actually pull the plug on this government. Am I on the right track at all, Kate Harrison?
Am I on the right track? Yeah. And don't forget you're on track. And don't forget the $15 billion net zero climate plan that was released right at the end of 2020. Okay. The day after the premiers asked for more funding for healthcare, and we're told, no, we don't have a dollar to spare. So the government had said at the beginning of December they were going to spend $100 billion between the climate plan and this new transit announcement. That's 30 of the $100 billion committed. This feels to me very much like a pre-election announcement. They're putting it out there in a forum to make mayors and cities happy, and it would be hard to convince me again, given how many other priorities are on the list right now, why they would pursue something like this when we're being told the pandemic is so immediate that it needs all eyes and ears and attention all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, it seems to be pre-election positioning.
Pre-election positioning. Cam Holmstrom, what do you think?
I could see it as that, but I'm not as convinced. Just because, like, for example, stuff, you know what? To me, that could be just as much about the fact that tax season is coming, and that if they didn't do something now, that could mean some even bigger issues for people right away. And honestly, this is the move they should have made all along. But when it comes to the transit announcement, you could say it's pre-election, but at the same time, it's the way it's timed out. It's not even saying elect me, you'll get this. It's saying elect me, then elect me again. You have, they could go through a full 4-year majority term and still not have gotten to that timeline before they actually pay out. Yeah. So to me, this is a lot of trying to make it up and make it seem like you're doing something without doing anything. I think that's the key thing here. When it comes to the CERB money, by announcing this, really, what changes to the government? They're not going to be collecting anything. Basically, it's pens down. No, so we're not really doing anything, but it has an effect. And for the transit funding, it's like, well, we're not going to have to do anything for 5-6 years. So, hey, we're doing something, but we're really doing nothing. And to be honest, like the way things are going right now with the changes to communities in the wake of COVID, with workplaces and all that, and with populations starting to shift around, I'm starting to wonder how that's going to change things like, frankly, transit funding, and how that's going to change communities' needs when it comes to it. And if I were being a smart politician, I might put that out in the announcement saying this is why we're holding it off.
Okay.
But otherwise it looks just like very usual Liberal.
Let me just jump right in there. Our correspondent on the Hill is Cormac McSweeney, and he's been following this announcement from the Infrastructure Minister, Catherine McKenna, the Ottawa Centre Liberal MP. She's been asked a few times to give a better breakdown of this $15 billion for public transit, like how much will flow right away or spent before 2026. She gave long responses but did not answer the question from our correspondent. So, we're a little tight on time, so there is a report that there's going to be a moving of the critic roles. A shadow cabinet shuffle, if you will. And that Pierre Poilievre, local member of parliament, firecracker in opposition, very effective in opposition, is going to be moved out of his role at finance. What do you think's going on there, Kate?
I think the Conservatives were foreshadowing over the weekend that they'd very much like to talk about jobs in the economy and not just continue to criticize the Liberals over vaccines, so they may deserve it. I think by moving, in my view, one of their strongest communicators to that industry portfolio, they're going to have some good sound bites and really hold Minister Champagne's feet to the fire in terms of what the plan for recovery actually looks like. Because thinking of the announcements that have just been made, there's a big number floated and an ambitious plan out there, but not a whole lot of detail. I think people are going to be starting to look for some of that detail. Poilievre doesn't necessarily need to be in finance in order to get under this government's skin. He's been able to prove that he's able to do that no matter what role he's able to hold.
Right.
So I think if they're starting to now look to more of a forward-looking message on jobs and recovery, he'll be able to carry those messages.
Yeah, I think if sorry, Kate, I think if Christopher Freeland is kind of Mr. Trudeau's minister of everything, I think Erin O'Toole has Pierre Poilievre as kind of the critic of everything.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So he'll be the critic, the jobs and industry critic. Ed Fast will become the finance critic. Cam, what do you think of these moves here and why they're being done?
Well, for one, I think it helps to have someone with a little bit more background experience in the finance role. I think if you're looking trying to form government, that makes sense. Mr. Fast has good credentials on that. When it comes to Poilievre himself, let's face it, he is a good communicator, but that's when he stays on track. That's when he stays on message. Unfortunately, he tends to veer sometimes into the conspiracy and a little bit more further away from the mainstream, and that's gotten him in trouble. So moving him out of that serious role, I can see why they want to do it. Plus, being a total partisan here, I do look forward to Pierre, actually, applying that real world private sector job experience he has in creating jobs, because I know he's swimming in it.
You're so mean.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.